The slap came so fast I didn't have time to react. My glasses went flying, shattering on the elegant ballroom floor as 130 guests watched in absolute silence. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest was far worse. Juliet, my daughter-in-law, had just slapped me on her wedding day because I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she screamed at me in front of everyone. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved to help me as I crouched down, trembling to pick up my broken glasses. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered among themselves, but no one, absolutely no one, dared to defend the poor old mother-in-law who had just been publicly humiliated. My son Ethan stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if I were invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore." Juliet continued smoothing her pristine wedding gown. "Ethan and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words were pure venom. For months I had endured her condescending comments about my worn-out clothes, my old car, my simple life. But this had crossed a line that should never have been touched. I rose slowly, feeling all eyes on me like sharp daggers. Tears streamed down my face, but inside something had changed forever. That slap wasn't just a physical blow, it was the final straw. For years I had kept a low profile, living with humility and discretion. I had secrets no one, not even my own son, knew. Memories of the last few months began to bombard my mind as I slowly walked toward the exit. I remembered when Juliet first came to my apartment 2 years ago. Her face fell when she saw my modest home, my old furniture, my small kitchen. "Seriously, this is where Ethan's mom lives." She had asked him, her voice just loud enough for me to hear. From that moment on, every visit had been a silent torture. "Aura, you should move to a smaller place," she had told me 3 months ago during a family dinner. "At your age, you can't maintain such a big apartment. Besides, Ethan and I are thinking of having kids soon. We'll need more space." Her fake smile didn't fool anyone except my son, who seemed to lose his personality whenever she spoke, acting like a puppet on a string. The humiliations had escalated gradually. First, it was the comments about my clothes. "Aurora, don't you have anything more modern to wear?" Then it was about my car. "That car is so old. It's dangerous for you to drive that." Next, it was my part-time job at the local flower shop. "I don't understand why a woman your age is still working instead of relaxing." Each phrase was a small poison dagger stabbing at my self-esteem. "My name is Aurora Hughes. I am 68 years old, and all my life I have been a woman who prefers discretion over ostentation. I work at a small flower shop 3 days a week. I drive a 10-year-old car. I buy my clothes at discount stores. To the outside world, especially to Juliet, I am just a middle-class widow living on a fixed income. But that's exactly the image I have carefully cultivated for decades." What none of those people looking at me with pity knew was that my life had been completely different before my husband passed. My husband, Robert, had not been the office worker everyone believed. We had made a conscious decision to live modestly, to keep our true wealth a secret, to protect our family's privacy in a way that I now understood had been prophetic. As I walked out of the ballroom, the guests' conversations followed me like a toxic cloud. "Poor thing, she looks so fragile," whispered Juliet's aunt. "The bride is right. That woman can't take care of herself anymore," added Ethan's cousin. "She should be in a retirement home, not living alone." Another guest commented with false compassion. Each word was like acid pouring on open wounds. The cool temperature of the ballroom's air conditioning contrasted sharply with the suffocating heat in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my cell phone in my worn black purse. A purse I had used for 5 years, not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I had learned to value practicality over appearances, something my daughter-in-law would clearly never understand. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't used in over a year because I had naively hoped it would never be necessary. "Carlos, it's Aurora. I need you to come to the Royal Oaks Ballroom immediately. Yes, right now. Bring the documents you know about. It's time for them to know the truth." My voice trembled, but there was a firmness in it I hadn't felt in a long time. "Are you sure, Mrs. Hughes?" Carlos asked with his professional but concerned voice. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I glanced back at the ballroom one last time, where I could see Juliet laughing with her friends, likely telling them how she had put her useless mother-in-law in her place. Ethan was by her side, smiling weakly, showing not a single ounce of remorse for what he had just witnessed. "Completely sure," I replied. 30 minutes, Carlos. No more." I hung up the phone and walked toward my car with determined steps. For the first time in years, I was going to drop the mask I had used to protect my family. For the first time, they were going to meet the real Aurora Hughes. And when that happened, when reality hit their perfect fake worlds, they would understand the true meaning of the word regret. The sting of Juliet's slap was still burning on my cheek when I walked out of that ballroom. Behind me, laughter and music carried on as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted forever. For 68 years, I had lived with humility, discretion, and the quiet discipline my husband and I chose as our way of life. That night, though, as my broken glasses lay scattered across the marble floor, I realized humility had been mistaken for weakness. I drove away slowly in my old sedan, hands trembling on the wheel. The neon lights of the city blurred through tears, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Every cruel word Juliet had whispered, every fake smile she had given, every time Ethan parroted her opinions, it all replayed like a merciless slideshow. I remembered the very first time she crossed the threshold of my apartment. 2 years ago, Ethan had brought her over with the excitement of a boy introducing his new sweetheart. She wore a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Her eyes swept the living room, not with curiosity, but with calculation, as though she were an appraiser. When she saw my second-hand furniture, she smiled and said, "How cozy." The way she stretched that one word told me all I needed to know. Later, when I served her Robert's favorite beef stew, she barely touched it, muttering about her strict diet. But she was never too strict to sip champagne at parties or order lobster on Ethan's credit card. That night, I stood in the kitchen washing dishes while they laughed in the living room, and I caught the faintest sound of Juliet's voice. "Don't worry, Ethan. Once we're married, things will change. She won't need such a big place anymore." That was the seed. And in the years that followed, it grew like poison ivy. Juliet's tactics were slow, deliberate. First came the small cuts. "Aurora, that dress is so outdated. Aurora, you shouldn't drive such an old car, it's dangerous. Aurora, at your age, working at a flower shop, looks sad." Each phrase delivered like a dagger wrapped in fake concern. Ethan would nod along as though hypnotized. He wasn't the boy I had raised, the boy who used to bring me daisies from the yard and say, "For you, Mom, because you're the prettiest." Somewhere along the way, my son had vanished, replaced by a man who measured his worth by Juliet's approval. But it wasn't only the insults. There were schemes, clever, rehearsed too well. 3 months ago, Juliet staged what she called a family dinner. Only later did I realize it was a carefully planned ambush. Between courses, she smiled sweetly and suggested, "Aurora, don't you think it would be easier for you to move into a retirement residence? You'd have friends, meals, prepared medical staff. Ethan and I could stay in your apartment just until we find our own place." Her parents joined in, chiming like a chorus. "At your age, dear, it's irresponsible to live alone. You don't want to be a burden if you fall ill." They spoke as though my life was already over, as if I were just a fragile relic to be tucked away. I remember the way Ethan stared at his plate, silent, nodding. That nod cut deeper than Juliet's slap ever would. As I drove that night after the wedding slap, I thought of Robert. My late husband had been a genius with investments, but he also carried an old-fashioned wisdom. Visible wealth attracts problems. Invisible wealth gives you power. Together we had built a fortune, then hidden it carefully behind modest living. We wore old coats, drove ordinary cars, and lived in a modest apartment, though secretly we owned more than most of those guests in that ballroom would see in their lifetimes. And now Robert's wisdom was proving prophetic. The problem had not come from strangers or thieves. It had come from the people who were supposed to love me. There were other memories, too darker ones, that resurfaced in those hours. I remembered a winter evening when Juliet arrived unexpectedly carrying glossy real estate brochures. She laid them across my coffee table like a gambler showing her cards. "Look, Aurora," she said, brightly beautiful retirement condos, spacious but manageable. Perfect for you. Imagine the peace of mind. But her eyes weren't on the photos of pools and community rooms. They were on the view from my balcony, the skyline, the park, the prime location. Another time, while Ethan was in the bathroom, I overheard Juliet whispering on the phone, "Yes, Mom, her apartment is perfect. If I can push her out, we can move right in. She's so naive, she'll thank us for helping." I stayed still, clutching my teacup, pretending not to hear when she came back, smiling. That night in the parking lot, with the ballroom's golden lights spilling through the windows behind me, I finally admitted the truth: they were not going to stop. This wasn't misguided concern. This was a campaign, methodical, ruthless. And my son, my only son, had been swallowed by it. The ache in my chest was unbearable, but alongside it came a rising fire. For years, I had been the safety net, secretly paying Ethan's debts, covering his rent, sending bonuses he thought came from work. Without me, their lavish lifestyle would have collapsed long ago, and yet they dared call me a burden. I could almost hear Robert's voice. "Aurora, kindness is sacred, but when kindness is exploited, it must end." So I reached for my phone, my old black purse trembling in my lap. My fingers found the number I had avoided dialing for over a year. "Carlos, it's Aurora. I need you at the Royal Oaks Ballroom. Bring the documents, all of them." He hesitated. "Mrs. Hughes, once we do this, there is no turning back." I glanced at the ballroom windows where Juliet was laughing in her gown, Ethan at her side like a puppet. My cheek still throbbed from her slap. 30 minutes, Carlos," I whispered. "No more." When I hung up, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in decades, I was done pretending. The mask of the poor widow was about to fall. As I sat in the car, memories kept coming, as if my life was reminding me why this moment had arrived. The birthdays Ethan had forgotten because Juliet had other plans. The Christmas dinner where she complained about my cheap decorations in front of the neighbors. The time she brought a man with a briefcase and appraiser to stand outside my building and measure its dimensions while pretending to chat. I thought of Lucy, my niece, who once told me, "Aunt Aurora, you're the strongest woman I know." She saw me as strong, but tonight, for the first time in years, I would truly prove it. The night air was cool. Leaves rustled in the streetlights. I knew that inside the ballroom they were celebrating what they thought was their victory. But outside in the shadows, a different kind of celebration was about to begin, the rebirth of a woman who had been underestimated for too long. I placed my hands firmly on the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "They wanted weakness. They will see strength. 30 minutes. Then everything would change. If this story touches something in you, stay with me. More truth is about to unfold." When I ended the call with Carlos that night, I didn't start the car right away. I sat in the parking lot staring at the steering wheel, breathing slowly until my heartbeat calmed. I had spent years pretending to be the fragile widow who lived in the shadows. Now, for the first time, I was going to step into the light. But preparation mattered. If I was going to stand against Juliet and even my own son, I needed more than anger. I needed proof, precision, and courage. The first thing I thought of was my journal. Tucked inside the drawer of my nightstand, it wasn't much to look at a leather-bound book with a broken clasp and yellowing pages. For years I had written in it quietly after long nights, jotting down Juliet's words, the humiliations, the subtle manipulations. Aurora, maybe your memory isn't what it used to be. Aurora, at your age, you shouldn't handle money alone. Aurora, you deserve a smaller, safer place. Each entry was dated, every cruel remark preserved. At the time, writing it down was therapy, my way of processing the hurt without confronting her directly. But now, as I waited in the dark, I realized that journal was more than therapy. It was evidence. The second memory that came rushing back was something Joseph had told me months ago. Joseph, my neighbor for nearly 20 years, had always been a quiet, watchful man. One evening, he knocked on my door, troubled. "Aurora?" he said, lowering his voice. "I saw your daughter-in-law at the mailboxes downstairs. She pulled open yours, then quickly shoved the envelopes back in when she saw me watching. Claimed it was a mistake. But her eyes, they weren't the eyes of someone who made a mistake. At the time, I brushed it aside, convincing myself Joseph was being overprotective. But now, in the context of everything else, I understood. Juliet had been fishing for information bank statements, notices, anything she could twist into her favor. Those two details, my journal and Joseph's warning, were about to become cornerstones of the case I would build. When I finally reached my apartment that night, the place felt different. The same old furniture stood where it always had. The same photographs of Robert and Ethan lined the hallway. But the air felt charged, as if the walls themselves knew change was coming. I sat at my desk and pulled out the brown folder Carlos had told me to keep safe. Inside were bank statements, property titles, and investment records. To anyone else, it was a portfolio. To me, it was the truth. Truth I had hidden even from my son. I placed the folder next to my journal and whispered, "Tomorrow you two will walk into that ballroom with me." The next morning, I called Carlos again. His voice, calm and professional, steadied me. "Aurora," he said, "are you sure you want to open this door? Once we reveal the scope of your finances, there's no going back. Privacy will be gone." "I know," I replied. "But Robert always said, invisible wealth protects you until the day it needs to protect you no more. That day has come. He promised to meet me that evening, bringing the legal documents I would need, termination of financial guarantees, suspension of transfers, and even the paperwork to amend my will." Later that day, Joseph stopped by with coffee as he often did. His old blue cardigan hung loosely on his shoulders, and his kind eyes studied me carefully. "You're quieter than usual, Aurora," he said. I debated keeping him in the dark, but then I remembered the way he had defended me before, even when others looked away. So I told him everything: the slap, the humiliation, the phone call to Carlos. His hands trembled as he set the coffee cup down. "That woman is a viper," he muttered. "I've always felt it. And Ethan, well, he's not the man you raised anymore." He paused, then added something that startled me. "You remember that evening last spring when Juliet brought a man in a suit to the building? I saw him pacing around your car, jotting notes on a clipboard. When I asked who he was, Juliet said he was an insurance adjuster. But no insurance man spends 20 minutes measuring a car that old. Aurora, she's been plotting for a long time." Hearing it again, the fury in my chest reignited. As dusk fell, I opened the closet where Robert's belongings were stored. His old jacket still smelled faintly of his cologne. In the inside pocket was the fountain pen he had always used to sign contracts. I held it in my hand, thinking, if I'm going to sign away years of secrecy, it will be with this pen. That evening, Carlos arrived with his briefcase. He spread the documents across my dining table, a termination of the lease guarantee for Ethan and Juliet's apartment, notices of suspension for the monthly transfers I had been making in Ethan's name, a prepared amendment to my will redirecting inheritance toward charities, protecting seniors. Signing those papers felt like cutting invisible threads that had held me bound for years. My hand trembled, but I pressed the pen firmly. With each signature, I was reclaiming my dignity. "You're brave, Aurora," Carlos said softly. "In 30 years, I've seen families torn apart by greed, but few have the courage to stop it before it destroys everything." I met his eyes. This isn't just about me. It's about showing them that kindness cannot be exploited forever. That night, as Carlos left, I walked to the balcony. The city lights flickered like watchful stars. Somewhere across town, Juliet was celebrating her new marriage, no doubt boasting of her victory. She had no idea what awaited her. I pressed my hand against the cool railing and whispered, "Robert, tomorrow they'll see who I really am. Tomorrow they'll understand." The hours before dawn were sleepless. I reviewed the documents, reread the journal, even rehearsed in my mind what I might say in front of 130 guests. I imagined Juliet's face when she realized the woman she thought was weak had been stronger all along. By sunrise, I was ready. If this story resonates with you, stay close because the moment of truth is about to break wide open. The next evening, I stood outside the Royal Oaks ballroom, once again clutching Robert's old fountain pen in my purse and the folder of documents Carlos had prepared. My hands no longer trembled. I wasn't the humiliated woman who had walked out into the parking lot. I was walking back in as someone else, entirely a woman, with nothing left to lose and nothing left to hide. Carlos met me at the entrance, his briefcase in hand. "Are you ready, Aurora?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were searching mine for doubt. "Ready," I said simply. The doors opened and the ballroom's golden light poured over us. The music played on the chandeliers sparkled, and Juliet floated across the floor in her gown, laughing as though she had already won the game. Ethan trailed beside her, stiff and uncomfortable in his tuxedo. As we entered, a hush fell. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I could almost hear them. "There's the poor old mother-in-law." She came back after being slapped, but I held my head high. My broken glasses had been replaced with an older spare pair, and though they sat crooked on my face, they reminded me of what I'd endured. Juliet spotted me and froze. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment before she masked it with a look of disdain. "Aurora," she said loudly, as though addressing a stranger. "I thought we made it clear you weren't welcome here anymore." On the contrary, I replied, my voice carrying across the room, "I believe it's time I stayed." Carlos cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. The rustle of papers drew curious glances. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "my name is Carlos Alvarez. I've been Mrs. Aurora Hughes's financial advisor for over 20 years. With her permission, I have documents to share, documents that reveal a story very different from the one you've been told tonight." Gasps spread across the room. Juliet's eyes narrowed like a cornered cat. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on his brow. The first document Carlos displayed was a copy of the monthly transfers I had made to Ethan for the past decade. Tens of thousands of dollars. Rent car payments, credit card bills, all quietly covered by me. Murmurs rose among the guests. "This woman," Carlos said, firmly gesturing toward me, "has been the silent hand keeping this marriage afloat. Without her, none of what you see tonight, the food, the champagne, the very venue, would have been possible." Faces turned toward Juliet, waiting for her to deny it. But she only clutched Ethan's arm tighter. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Then Carlos revealed the second piece, the termination of my financial guarantees. "As of this evening, all support ends. Mrs. Hughes has decided that her kindness will no longer be exploited." From this day forward, Ethan and Juliet stand on their own. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the floor. I felt the room's eyes shift toward me. For the first time in years, I didn't shrink from them. I met their stares with quiet strength. And then something unexpected happened. One of the photographers, a young man in a black vest, stepped forward nervously. "Mrs. Hughes, I think you should see this." He lifted his camera and replayed a clip he had captured earlier that evening. The screen flickered, showing Juliet in her pristine gown, surrounded by bridesmaids. Her voice, dripping with venom, was unmistakable. "Watch this. I'll have that old woman hand me her keys before the night's over. She won't know what hit her." The room erupted. Gasps turned into angry whispers, whispers into outright condemnation. Juliet lunged at the photographer, but Ethan pulled her back, his face pale with shame. And among the crowd, my eyes landed on Michael, a boy who had grown up with Ethan, who used to eat at our table and laugh in our kitchen. He stood there stunned, shaking his head slowly. When our eyes met, his expression said it all. This is not the Ethan I knew. That small moment pierced me deeper than all the insults, for even strangers could now see how far my son had drifted from the boy I once raised. Carlos wasn't finished. He placed the final document on the podium. Mrs. Hughes has also amended her will. Effective immediately, her estate will no longer be inherited by her son and daughter-in-law. Instead, it will be donated to organizations dedicated to protecting seniors from financial and emotional abuse. The ballroom fell silent, the weight of the revelation pressing on every chest. Juliet's face went red then, white, her dreams of wealth crumbling in front of 130 witnesses. Ethan's shoulders sagged, his eyes glued to the floor. I stepped forward, my voice steady. For years I allowed myself to be treated as a burden, humiliated in my own family. But tonight I reclaim my dignity. No one, no son, no daughter-in-law has the right to strip an elder of their worth. If you thought I was powerless, you were wrong. The room erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger. Strangers clapped, not because they knew me, but because they recognized the truth in my words. Juliet collapsed into a chair, tears smearing her makeup. Ethan tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time in a long while, silence was my ally, not my enemy. When it was over, I walked toward the exit. Guests parted like waves, some whispering apologies, others offering soft smiles. Michael gave me a small nod of respect as I passed. The photographer lowered his camera, meeting my eyes with a look of quiet solidarity. Behind me, the perfect wedding lay in ruins. Ahead of me, the night air was cool and fresh like a promise. If you believe dignity is worth defending, stay with me. There's more truth yet to unfold. When the applause faded and I walked toward the exit, I thought that would be the end of it. But life has a way of unraveling threads until the whole fabric is torn. The ballroom was not finished with Juliet and Ethan yet. Behind me, the music had stopped. The chatter had shifted from whispers of gossip to outright judgment. Some guests hurried out, quietly ashamed of what they had just witnessed. Others stayed eager to see how the story would continue. I paused at the doorway, my back straight, my purse clutched close. Part of me wanted to disappear into the night, but another part of me, perhaps Robert's part, knew it was worth bearing witness to the consequences. The ballroom manager, a tall man in a crisp black suit, strode to the center of the room. His face was tight, his voice sharp with professionalism. "Mr. Hughes, Mrs. Hughes," he said, addressing Ethan and Juliet. "Our agreement for this evening was guaranteed by Mrs. Aurora Hughes. I've just been informed that guarantee has been terminated." The words fell like thunder. Guests gasped. Juliet's eyes went wide and she clutched her pearls as though they could shield her. "That's not possible," she snapped. "It is," the manager said coolly. "Without payment in full, this event cannot continue. The bar will close. The staff will leave. And your guests," he gestured toward the crowd, "will have to vacate." The humiliation was complete. People began gathering their coats, muttering under their breath. Some looked at Juliet with disgust, others at Ethan with pity. Juliet's voice rose, shrill and panicked. "You can't do this on my wedding day. Do you know who I am?" The manager didn't flinch. "I know exactly who you are, Mrs. Hughes, and I know this ballroom has hosted senators, governors, and dignitaries, but none of them ever tried to pay with someone else's kindness." The silence that followed was crushing. Juliet's face twisted, her makeup streaking as tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan stood frozen, his hands limp at his sides, as though the weight of years of lies had finally broken him. I thought that would be the end. But then from the corner of the room, an older woman approached me. Her silver hair was styled neatly, her posture dignified. She had been sitting quietly most of the evening, watching everything unfold with calm eyes. She placed a gentle hand on my arm and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "My dear, you are not alone." Her name was Mrs. Langford, a widow like myself. She had lost her husband 10 years earlier and endured her own battles with greedy relatives. When my brother-in-law tried to strip me of my home, she said I stood up too, and though I was terrified, it was the right thing to do. Her words were a balm on my soul. In that moment, I realized this wasn't only my fight. It was a story that belonged to countless others elders who had been silenced, dismissed, or taken advantage of. The crowd listened. Some nodded their eyes, softening. For the first time that evening, sympathy turned into solidarity. I was no longer just a victim of a slap. I was a woman who had fought back, and my courage was giving others permission to remember their own. Meanwhile, Juliet collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Her bridesmaids huddled around her, whispering frantic reassurances, but their eyes betrayed doubt. Ethan tried to kneel beside me, his lips trembling as though he wanted to beg forgiveness. But when our eyes met, I shook my head gently. "Not here. Not now." He lowered his gaze to the carpet, defeated. The guests trickled out. Some offered polite words of encouragement as they passed me. Others avoided eye contact, ashamed they had once clapped for Juliet. The photographer who had shown the recording earlier gave me a small nod as if to say, "You gave us all something to remember." As the ballroom emptied, the staff began clearing plates and folding chairs. The grand chandeliers still glowed, but the light felt hollow, exposing more than it illuminated. The wedding was over, not with the toss of a bouquet or the cutting of a cake, but with the collapse of illusions. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I stepped into the night, the city lights shimmering against the velvet sky. Carlos followed, carrying his briefcase, his face calm but firm. "You handled yourself with dignity," he said softly. "They will never forget tonight. Neither would I." As we walked to the car, Mrs. Langford joined me briefly. She pressed a folded note into my hand. "If you ever need someone who understands, call me," she said. Her touch lingered, warm and reassuring. I tucked the note into my purse, feeling the unexpected gift of new friendship. From the parking lot, I glanced back one final time. Through the tall windows, I saw Juliet slumped in her gown, her crown of flowers drooping, her fairy tale crumbling. Ethan stood nearby, shoulders hunched, staring at the floor. For years, they had seen me as weak, as disposable. But tonight, I had walked out stronger than I had walked in. And though their world was collapsing, mine was just beginning to rise. If you believe in standing tall when life tries to push you down, stay with me. The story is far from finished. The night of the ruined wedding ended with silence in my apartment. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, though I knew this battle was far from over. People like Juliet did not surrender easily. And sure enough, just 1 week later, the storm began. A thick envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside were legal papers stamped and signed. Juliet and Ethan were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent. The accusation stung like a fresh wound. They claimed I suffered from memory loss delusions and paranoia, that my financial decisions were irrational and dangerous. If the court agreed, my son and his wife would gain control of everything I owned. I sat at my kitchen table, the papers spread out before me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. To betray me at the altar of greed was one thing. To brand me as incapable to erase my dignity with ink and lies that was war. Carlos assured me we would fight. "They'll have to provide evidence," he said firmly, "and we'll provide stronger evidence of the truth." But Juliet was cunning. Within days, she produced a so-called expert, Dr. Simon Harlow, a physician, whose reputation was already shadowed by questionable ethics. He wrote a report claiming I was showing signs of cognitive decline based on a single brief encounter in which Juliet had dragged me into casual conversation weeks before. She asked me the date. I explained to Carlos bitterly. I told her it was Sunday. She smirked and said, "Close enough." That was her test. Carlos shook his head. "We'll dismantle this. Lies rarely survive the light." The hearing drew near, but something unexpected happened before the court date. A journalist named Ana Flores, working for a local television station, called me. "Mrs. Hughes," she said gently, "your story has been circulating since the wedding. A guest shared the video of Juliet striking you, and it's been viewed nearly 1,000,000 times online. Would you be willing to talk to us on camera?" At first I hesitated. I valued privacy all my life. But then I remembered Mrs. Langford's words in the ballroom. "You are not alone." If speaking out could help others, perhaps it was worth it. So one morning, Anna sat in my living room with her camera crew. I told her everything from Juliet's insults about my clothes to the staged family dinner to the night of the slap. I even showed her my journal, the entries lined with Juliet's words. Anna's eyes glistened as she listened. The segment aired 2 nights later. It was called "When Kindness is Exploited." One widow's fight for dignity. The response was overwhelming. Viewers flooded the station with calls, letters, and emails. Some shared their own stories of being manipulated by family. Others expressed outrage at Juliet's audacity. The court of public opinion had already ruled long before the legal one ever could. Even the local newspaper ran an editorial. Aurora Hughes reminds us that elders are not burdens. They are treasures, and treasures must be protected. When the hearing finally arrived, the courtroom was packed not just with lawyers and clerks, but with ordinary citizens who had followed my story. Reporters filled the back row. Juliet entered in a tailored suit, her expression carefully composed. Ethan at her side, pale and drawn. Dr. Harlow took the stand, his testimony shaky under cross-examination. My attorney asked him how long he had spent with me. 5 minutes, he admitted reluctantly. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came our witnesses, Joseph, who testified about Juliet rifling through my mailbox, Mrs. Langford, who spoke about the night of the wedding, and Ana Flores, who verified the authenticity of the viral video. Finally, I took the stand. My voice was steady, my eyes clear. "I may be 68, I told the judge, but my mind is sharp enough to see the truth. And the truth is that greed can blind even the people we love most. I will not be silenced, and I will not be erased." The judge's ruling was swift. Juliet and Ethan's petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could never bring it again. Dr. Harlow was referred to the medical board for investigation. Juliet erupted in tears, her facade shattered. Ethan sat motionless, unable to meet my gaze. When I left the courthouse, a small crowd applauded. Strangers shook my hand, some with tears in their eyes. "Thank you for standing up," one man said. "My mother went through something similar, but she didn't have the strength to fight back." I smiled, though inside I felt both weary and proud. This was never just my battle. It was a story for every elder who had been pushed aside, disrespected, or taken for granted. That night, I sat on my balcony, the city lights glowing below. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, not because of the wealth I still possessed, but because I had reclaimed something more precious, my dignity. I thought of Robert. Wealth is protection, he had always said. But tonight, I realized dignity is the greater wealth. If this story speaks to you, leave me a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the final chapter of this journey. After the courtroom doors closed and the echoes of applause faded, my life changed in ways I could never have predicted. The petition was over, the lies dismantled, and the world now knew the truth. But the story did not end in that courthouse. In some ways, it was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, I received a call from a national television producer. They wanted me to share my story on a program that highlighted issues facing seniors across the country. At first, I hesitated. I had always valued privacy. For decades, Robert and I hid our wealth because we believed quiet living was safer. But now I understood something deeper. Silence could also be dangerous. Silence was how people like Juliet thrived. So I agreed. The day of the broadcast, the studio lights were bright, almost blinding. I sat in the chair, my heart pounding, but when the cameras rolled, I found my voice. I told America about the night of the slap, the years of insults, the ambush at the family dinner table, the staged reports of my so-called decline. I didn't tell it with bitterness. I told it with clarity, because bitterness chains you to the past, but truth that sets you free. The segment aired on a Sunday evening, and the response stunned me. Letters poured in. Emails from strangers across the country filled my inbox. One woman from Ohio wrote, "Aurora, your courage gave me the strength to finally say no to my son, who's been draining my retirement for years." A man from Arizona wrote, "I never defended my mother the way I should have. Listening to you reminded me of the dignity she deserved." I wish I had spoken up sooner. The messages humbled me. My story had become more than mine. It was a mirror in which others saw their own lives. But not all the letters were supportive. One envelope arrived with Juliet's handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside was a single page. Her words were smeared with tears. "Aurora, I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. I am pregnant now, and I fear raising a child without stability. Please help us. For the baby's sake." I sat with that letter for a long time. My heart ached, not because of Juliet, but because of the child who had done nothing wrong. Still, I knew what Robert would say. Mercy must not be confused with surrender. So I prayed for that child, but I did not open the door again. Some choices once made cannot be unmade. Ethan never came to see me after the trial. Word reached me that he had moved into a small apartment far from the city, working odd jobs to pay debts. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if he ever thought of the boy he used to be, the boy who brought me daisies and called me the prettiest woman in the world. I miss that boy. But the man he had become was lost to me, at least for now. In the months that followed, I poured my energy into something new. I donated portions of my estate to organizations that defend seniors against abuse and exploitation. I spoke at community centers, encouraging others to tell their stories. I even mentored younger women at the flower shop, where I still worked part-time, reminding them that strength isn't always loud. It can be quiet, patient, and resilient. And something remarkable happened. People began to stop me on the street. "Mrs. Hughes," they'd say, "thank you for showing us that age doesn't mean weakness." That became my legacy, more precious than any fortune Robert and I had ever built. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun sink into the horizon, I reflected on the journey. I thought of the ballroom of shattered glasses, on the marble floor of the sting on my cheek. And I thought of where I stood now, no longer broken, but whole. The lesson was clear: dignity is not something others can give or take away. It is something you must claim for yourself, even when the world tries to strip it from you. And so to you listening now, whether you are a parent, a grandparent, or simply someone who has been underestimated, I offer this message. Do not let anyone convince you that your worth has expired with age. Do not surrender your voice because others shout louder. Stand tall even when your knees ache. Speak clearly even when your heart trembles. Because your dignity is the inheritance you pass to the generations after you. I once thought my story was about humiliation and betrayal, but now I know it is about resilience. It is about choosing strength over silence. And it is about remembering that no matter how old you are, you can still surprise those who underestimate you. The city lights twinkled below as I whispered to Robert's memory, "We did it." We lived in silence when we had to, but we spoke when it mattered most. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next story, because every chapter holds a truth we all need to hear.